Hey guys, my name is Helena. So today we're going to start with our new series, which is the Antagonist and Protagonist series, and we're gonna obviously start with the Flying Dutchman. First, before we begin, I just wanted to say I think it was worth it not filming most of the last 2 months because I got a 1.7 for my bachelor's thesis. So thank you, Wagner, again, because I can't write anything without quoting Wagner somewhere. And obviously, he had his time. He had a few sentences in there in the Shakespeare musical thesis. So yeah, just want to say that because I'm pretty proud of it. So protagonist and antagonist in The Flying Dutchman, and we're literally at the first problem with this, because is there even a protagonist and antagonist? Like, have we got someone who's really pure and someone who's obviously evil? No, we don't have that. And we're just gonna go through a few versions, just gonna say it like that, and then we're gonna say what makes the most sense, why it doesn't make sense. And the first version that I would say is, stay with me in this, okay? Is God versus devil. There, I've said it. That's the probably most consequent telling of this whole thing. Makes the problem that obviously there's no one of those on stage. But as we all know, Flying Dutchman said, I will drive around this island, whatever, and if it's the last thing I do, and Satan was like, putting you up on this, you're just gonna not die until there is this woman, this angel, who will save you and who will be true to you for the rest of her life. So obviously, the devil, or Satan, has a pretty strong case to be the antagonist in this one. Just saying. Because he curses the Hollander. I don't think there's like, this is probably the most evil thing that happens in the whole Dutchman, and it's in the antecedent narrative, if I remember that word correctly. So he's a pretty strong contestant, okay? So then we are going to what would be the protagonist if obviously Satan was the antagonist. And the protagonist would be, in this version, would be either God or Santa. We're going to start with God. Obviously, someone has to save him and someone has to send the savior. So what God does is sending Santa to the Dutchman so she'll be able to be true till her death. Committing suicide, which I don't think that religion or Catholics or like Christians are so big on suicide. Not that I remember, but still, like, he sends Santa to save the Hollander. Pretty strong thing. So we've kind of got this vice situation. We don't have Satan in there, we don't have God in there, but we kind of have the Dutchman who has been cursed by Satan again, and we have Santa who's been sent by God. Santa who has been sent. I wonder if there is the connection. So this would be kind of the God and Satan would be the first version that could be a thing. I don't know. The second version, obviously, that results out of this would be that the Dutchman is the antagonist and Santa's the protagonist. So this would stand in case of, obviously, Santa is a pretty strong protagonist. This is the day where I don't have my water here. Santa's a pretty strong antagonist, so she believes she's pure, she's this and that, she's really a good girl, she just wants to save him because she's romantically involved with the picture she's got in his head her head. Bit strange. And he was stupid enough to say, yeah, I'm not gonna die until I do this. And Satan took him by his word. So he's kind of in this connection with Satan. You stay with me. And so this is another thing. Does it hold up? No. And I'll tell you why it doesn't hold up. Because Wagner is very, very strong with whom he likes and whom he dislikes. And that's quite obvious over the whole course of all Wagnerian works. It's a thing. So whenever Wagner doesn't like someone, he, for example, doesn't die. Stay with me. Eiberich doesn't die. Mime gets a pretty bad death. Let's just be real. Hagen is like just drowned in a few seconds. This is not a Wagnerian death. Melot is just like, yeah, okay, he dies. Happens. This is all not this great of a deal in case of Wagnerian deaths. Think Brünnhilde. What? 20 minutes of death. Like, come on. This is a death. He liked her. Same goes for Isolde, of course. Same goes for Tristan, with his Tristan, der Held, in Jubel der Pracht, etc. There's a lot of text before their deaths, just something that they themselves speak. And this is not the case for the Dutchman. Wow, I contradicted myself right now. Well, the Dutchman kind of has that, but he's kind of in between. Because he doesn't have as great a death as Brünnhilde, as Sieglinde also. Sieglinde dies, as we all know, off stage. She has this great O Herrste Wunder in the third act. Is it act still? Or is it scene? I'm not sure. In the third act. Let's just say in the third act. Even she has this great outburst, which also Center has, by the way. But the Dutchman also doesn't have this sneaky death. Let's just say it. He doesn't have that thing like Mime. Because he has an outburst. The Holländer has an outburst. It's not this kind of Zurück vom Ring! Boom! That's not what it is. Let's be real. So the Dutchman is kind of an ambiguous figure. Let's just say with an ambiguous figure. But he's not supposed to be the bad one, because otherwise he wouldn't be worth saving. Do you get what I mean? Wagner's very particular with whom he likes, whom he dislikes, but whom he doesn't like, they don't get saving. This is just a thing. Like, even someone who hasn't done as bad things as making a pact with the devil or being cursed by the devil. For example, Beckmesser, he doesn't get saving, he gets ridiculed. It's a thing. By the way, this whole death is great and stuff. You can see this the most clearly in Siegfried in Act 2. Because he doesn't like Mime, so Mime more or less gets, oh, you're dead. Life goes on. This is Mime. With Fafner, it's like, oh, Fafner, I think we're so similar. It's so horrible. What happened to us? You're such a great friend. I didn't want to kill you. Huh? This is Fafner. So we have a very clear distinction in between these two. And Hollander is ambiguous, but he's not the bad guy, in my opinion. Because otherwise he wouldn't be worth saving, as I said. This is just not... Wagner has a very, very clear mind, and this is because he also wrote his own libretti. So with others, there would be, like, I don't know, Mozart in Schikaneder. If Schikaneder had an absurd idea, or he said, we want to make this one bad, then Mozart would have said, yeah, don't you think that's too to our worldview. This is a bad example, by the way. I just thought of that. Because the magic flute has its own political problems. Anyway, you get what I mean. Wagner's not being questioned. So Wagner can have his whole hate for a particular group of people. This might also be a series, by the way. For a particular group of people, he can just live it out. And the Dutchman is not one of them. He gets saved. He's worth saving. So that's why he cannot be bad. And he knows that he's done wrong. This is a big one. Most others of the bad people, of the antagonists, they don't know they did anything wrong. Ortrud doesn't know she's done anything wrong. Venus doesn't know she's done anything wrong. Kundry is debatable. Alberich doesn't know he's been anything wrong. Mime doesn't know he's done anything wrong. Milord doesn't know he's been anything. Yeah, good. Milord has this kind of redemption moment, like in the moment he dies, but still. Hollander doesn't fit into this, but he also doesn't fit in the protagonist thing very good. And this is the next thing that we're going to talk about, is what if we put the Hollander as the protagonist? Why not? We can try it. So if Hollander is the protagonist, then who's the antagonist? It's Eric. It's obviously Eric. And this is probably the one, next to Senta being the protagonist and Eric being the antagonist, that's the closest to what we are supposed to feel. Because Eric is the one who destroys it all. He more or less, let's say more or less, because it's very round corners, he more or less kills Senta. And I'm gonna back this up. So, if Eric wouldn't have told the Dutchman that, hey, you know, this girl was with me, you're out, then he wouldn't have left, and Senta wouldn't have felt the urge to kill herself well, for the Dutchman to see that she's true and to save him. So, from this standpoint, Eric's a pretty bad guy. On the other hand, he's also an ambiguous figure, and this is what I love so much about Wagner, and this is actually something that we're gonna have a lot within the next few weeks. These ambiguous figures, because they are not truly bad or truly good. It's just not what's going on. We have to be very clear about this. And this is, by the way, I'm going to spoil this, for Meistersinger. Meistersinger is pretty big on making people ambiguous and having Wagner have his own opinion in this, based on who's going to be the protagonist. Just saying. It's also about time. I mean, there's one role that sings like 3 hours. It's a thing, or 2.5 hours. So this is pretty obvious who he wants to say the most. But back to the Dutchman. So Eric's pretty ambiguous, because if you think about it, he loves Senta, he sees her obsession with some dead guy, or should be dead guy, let's say it like that, and wants to save her from it. So he himself has a savior complex, as we all have probably. Just think of it, if you think of him as TV characters, think of Wilson. I'm currently watching House. This is why I got Wilson. Wilson's got a savior complex. By the way, love House. I've rewatched it like the second time in a year, and it's simply great. Anyway, Eric's got a savior complex, so he sees this, sees the obsession, and says, no, I'm gonna help her. I'm gonna be her steady rock, which works for the most of it. But she's still got this obsession until he comes in. And she says, yeah, I'm a stupid child, I don't know what I sing. So there's two versions. Either it's not that serious with her obsession, which please it is, come on, she kills herself for this guy. Or two, she knows that he will not like it, and therefore changes what she says and says, "I'm a stupid child, I don't know what I sing." And this is, by the way, a pretty general thing for girls if they don't know what to say in Wagner. They're just like, "I'm a stupid child, I don't know what to do." Or a nice child doesn't ask questions. It's like irony. But anyway. So Santa knows that Eric doesn't like her obsession. And Eric wants to save her. Then comes the Dutchman. And Santa's like completely into it. But let's just think about it. No one knows if he's actually the Dutchman. Because, yes, there's a portrait of him in the room where the girls are doing their thing. Let's say it like this. What is it? Spinnen, I think. Just remember the thing. It's like in the Munich version of the Flying Dutchman, the last one, they were like actually spinning, like spinning on a wheel, like the sport. And that was pretty fun because they just thought, oh, what could they do today? Which is like the same rotation. And they thought, yeah, they're gonna have a spinning class. Anyway. Yes, there's a portrait of the of the Flying Dutchman, but we all know how unreliable portraits are. I mean, this is absurd, quite literally, quite frankly. I don't think if you met most of the people who are on portraits, if you went back in time and you were like to see one of them on the street, you were like, yeah, don't know. I actually don't know if it's that accurate. If that's the person that I see. Anyway, so why would she recognize the Flying Dutchman just from this? And we have again this Lohengrin. I call it the Lohengrin dilemma, because the Hollander only says who he is at the very end of the thing, and the opera. So when Eric says you don't know who this guy is and you immediately get engaged to him because your daddy says it, because your daddy's, quite frankly, loves gold and he does anything to get gold. This is stupid. What you're doing is just frankly stupid. Okay? But this is the whole thing. Because he is wrong, but he has the right thinking process. And at least he has a thinking process, a thought process. At least he has one. Darlan's like, oh, you've got money. I've got a daughter. This is great. We're gonna align forces. You get my daughter, I get your gold. It's a win-win situation. So at least Eric's got a thought process. He doesn't know who this guy is. He does know that Santa has an obsession. But we don't know, well, we don't know at the beginning. As an audience we do know, but in the piece they don't know if the Hollander is actually the Hollander. It could just be some strange guy who's got like stranded on an island and Darlan brought him home. That could be the thing. Because after all, they never talk about this. They've got this internal monologue in their duet, and that's it. There's never this like, do you need saving maybe? Because I could provide that. I could be true to you for the rest of my life. This is not it. This is not happening. And so Eric, if we make Flying Dutchman himself the protagonist of the whole thing, would probably work one of the better versions, would be one of the better versions of an antagonist, just because story-wise he is. Because he can't let go of Santa, if we look at it from the Dutchman's perspective, she has to kill herself immediately. So the Dutchman doesn't even get his wedding night. Anyway. This is a bummer. So Eric could be the antagonist, but on the other hand, he's a tenor. And this is very, very seldom for for Wagner that he makes an antagonist a tenor. It's mime. It's literally more or less only mime. Could talk about Fasold, but he's not the main antagonist in The Ring, / in Rheingold. It's just not. So Eric's still supposed to be the young lover in Wagner's head, and the Dutchman is a baritone. We all know what baritones are like. Yeah, come on. Count Almaviva in Le Nozze di Figaro. We all know him. We despise him. Yes, I liked him when I first saw him, obviously, because otherwise I would be loving opera if I hadn't seen Le Nozze di Figaro. You know the story, my dad thought Wagner and Mozart are mostly the same, so he got me tickets for Bayreuth. And yeah, that was how this obsession was born. Luckily, Wagner is not dead. Anyway, so what have we got now? We have got this God versus devil, which kind of works. It's okay, I think. It's a bit bad because it doesn't really work on stage, if you get what I mean. If we have this would have to be a production, you know? This would have been to be a production where you've got like puppets on stage, and we'll have overdimensional Satan and God, and like playing with the figurines on stage. It would have to be conveyed. Senta and the Holländer as Senta being protagonist and Holländer being antagonist also doesn't quite work, because Holländer is not really an antagonist, because he's saved. He is saved and he gets a more or less good death. It's a thing. The third option would be the one that probably makes the most sense story-wise, which is that we have Eric at least as an antagonist. And in this case, you have either the Dutchman as the protagonist or Senta as the protagonist, if we have Eric as the antagonist. Because, well, the thing is, Senta and Eric like each other. They are engaged. They are supposed to be married. If it was after Mary's sense and after Eric's sense himself. It's just Darland who doesn't want them to get married because, well, Darland likes gold and Eric doesn't have it. It's a thing. So they're engaged to be married. So to have them as protagonist and antagonist doesn't work in the conventional sense of saying they don't like each other, which is the usual thing with protagonist and antagonist. If we just say he's the bad guy, she's the good guy, then it doesn't really matter so much if they like each other or not. God, I hope this is gonna get easier next week. Anyway, next week is gonna get easier because there's a very clear antagonist in this, in Tannhäuser. So really, if you just look at the piece, it's probably that Eric is the antagonist. If you just look at the piece, you can say either Holländer or Senta are the protagonists because, well, in this case, probably the Dutchman, let's be real. Yeah, let's just say like this. Let's just say the Dutchman is the protagonist and Eric is the antagonist in this thing. Also, I realized just now that I kind of use protagonist and antagonist also in the sense of who's the good force and who's the evil force. So, you know what I mean. Yeah, well. Yeah, I think it's probably the strongest thing that Holländer is the protagonist. Yeah, that Holland is the protagonist and Eric is the antagonist. That's probably the strongest reading you can have if you just look at the thing and not look at any production, because any production can be different. The current one they have in Bayreuth, I haven't seen it. I just want to say that I haven't seen it. I saw the last one in Bayreuth. This was actually like the present from my dad. Saw the last one in Bayreuth, and this was kind of my first falling for Wagner. My falling for like the Seconda Donna, because I loved Mary and I thought it was great that she got that the backstory of knowing the Dutchman already. Because why otherwise would she not want to sing that song on that particular day? Out of 7 years, with 365 to 366 days a year, she doesn't want to sing that song on that particular day that he comes on land. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, people. And this is probably not something that Wagner intended. It's just a thing that he said, no, Santa has to sing this song. It's not supposed to be Mary. But I think it's a pretty strong reading from directors if they say she knows him already. And I think in the current one, it's Mary shooting the Dutchman in the end. Not sure. But this would be another reading of the Flying Dutchman, and to see who the protagonist and the antagonist / who the good force and who the evil force. I might have to recalibrate that for next week, by the way, with the good and evil. So this might be a different reading. You get what I mean? But I think that depends very, very much on the director. And I'm just gonna make an excursion into Shakespeare, which is, there's a very, very, very famous speech, and I wrote my thesis a bit about that. It was like 1/4 of my thesis, this speech, or 1/8, depending on how you look at it, was the last speech of Catherine in The Taming of the Shrew, and it is very not good for women, let's just say. It's, I am ashamed that women are so simple, to offer war when we should kneel for peace. And I don't know it further because I only know it when I sing it, and no one wants to hear that. Anyway, I am ashamed that women are so simple, to offer war when we should feel peace. Okay, good. I know the melody, I don't know the words anymore. Anyway, this is a very famous speech. I am ashamed that women are so simple. And you can see it differently. There are different directors who say, okay, this is a total speech of obedience, and others say this is meant ironically. And you can convey this through speech, which is obviously not something that you can do with Wagner. But what you can do is reading him very, very differently. And I would argue that this is really a director's thing, especially with the Dutchman. There are ways to have other very, very obvious protagonist and antagonist. For example, Meistersinger, it's pretty obvious who the protagonist and antagonist is. I would say it's almost on the nose. But there are directors who are even able to say, okay, we make the guy who's supposed to be bad now the good guy, and we make the guy who's supposed to be good now the bad guy. This is possible. So everything that I say now is really just more of a general thing. And don't believe me. Like, if you have another reading of this, if you say, I don't know, Santa's the good one, Darlan's the bad one, I don't know, then tell me. I'm always glad to talk to people about Wagner. And yeah, this would be like the first episode, which is kind of ambiguous. I would have liked or preferred to start with something that was more, well, where you obviously can say, this is good, this is bad, we know who's the antagonist, we know who's the protagonist. But well, that's not why we're here. We're not in a Mozart opera. We're not in Verdi heavens. In Verdi, this would have been easy. It was like, okay, Tosca's good, Scarpia's bad, end of episode. That would have been Tosca. And yeah, Verdi and Puccini, they are both like pretty obvious with who they prefer. Verdi obviously also has his Shakespeare stuff. So this is also obvious who's good and bad. But not for Wagner, because we love Wagner because he's ambiguous, as we all know. Saw it with Valentin Schwarz. Oh god, I can't believe this is not gonna happen this year anymore. Anyway, so this is the three versions that you have. You have God versus Satan. You have, what did we have? Yeah, well, obviously Eric versus the Dutchman, and we have the Dutchman versus Santa. Yeah. This was the first episode, and it's gonna get easier next week, I promise you, because next week we're gonna have one of our very, very dearly beloved, but still unfortunately named, Jewish knight figures next week. So it's pretty obvious who's gonna be the bad guy. Or shall I say bad gal next week. See you, and have a nice day.